I'm using the Husqvarna VIKING Designer Topaz 65 to explain some of the functions in the embroidery stitch out mode. I have a design, so I can now move to stitch out, and I get this embroidery stitch out settings screen here. Now you notice that it comes up with options, and those options are actually default settings that you can change in your machine settings for embroidery. You also, if today you're using your straight stitch plate, but you normally use your standard stitch plate, then I have the option to change that on this stitch out setting. Now, the straight stitch plate is an optional plate. If I don't have it, it makes sense for me to keep the standard plate as the default. The embroidery hoop was always picked up from the size that you've input into the embroidery edit screen. The same with the feet. Am I using the optional sensor Q foot, or do I use the floating foot? If I'm mostly use the optional sensor Q foot, but today I need to use the floating foot, well then I have the ability to make that change here rather than make the change in the default settings. So you have a lot of flexibility in how you're working your machine, how you set it up. I have color block options and basting options. I have access to these two settings also in the stitch out mode, but you can set them here as well. And then the final one is your thread cut options, and I have the ability to have the thread cutter off, use the automatic thread cutter, or use the thread cutter and the automatic jump stitch. So, and don't forget, you have to scroll because there's more information than will fit onto one screen. And lastly, you have the option to select do not show this information again, and you can also select that in the machine settings for embroidery. I highly recommend that you leave that activated so that you do see this list. It's just a refresher. Do I actually have the correct stitch plate on my machine? Do I have the correct embroidery foot on my machine? Do I want to baste my topper, or am I floating my fabric in the hoop, and so on? So I think it's a good idea to keep it in. You do have the ability to turn it off if you'd like. Once we have everything selected, we can select apply and move into embroidery stitch out mode.